Hello, excited to be here again. Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now and start this slide presentation. And give me a second here. All right. I think you guys can see that, right? Okay.
Yep.
Good. Let's get started. So I'll speak, and I want to go over some main points because this lecture, we have to go a little slow during this lecture because I'm asking that people not only learn about nutritional science, but also learn about emotional science, because the potent strategy for permanent weight loss is not just about changing the way you eat. It's about changing the way you think and how you think about the world. And I'm going to link this to marry these two thoughts together, hopefully in a cohesive manner, so you understand what I'm asking people to try to achieve when they're trying to modify their diet. And the main thing here, before we get started, the main thing we want to achieve here is that we recognize that you have to eat healthfully to lose weight, and you have to eat healthfully to be healthy. But we're thrust in a world around us where people are not eating healthy. They're on a race to commit suicide with food. And it makes us health nuts feel and get pressure that we're not being socially accepted. We're not getting praised, we're getting ostracized, and we make other people feel uncomfortable. And many people they want to fit in, they're social animals, and they want to get the approval of others, which further complicates and makes more difficult this changing to a healthy diet, especially the diet as healthful as I recommend. So I'm going to give you these strategies that are important just to be healthy in the modern world and just to have a healthy emotional outlook on life that's going to help you live longer. Because being in great health is not all about food. It's also about our emotions and our feelings as well. So with that as an introduction, let's get started. So getting back to just reviewing a few basics before we get into some of the more newer concepts, is that our long-term health, our healthy life expectancy, our play span, and our lifespan is linked to this equation, H equals N over C, which means that your body cells need nutrients in the cells. And the concentration of nutrients in the cells determines the health of those cells and the longevity of those cells. So cells are deficient in nutrients. They build up more toxic metabolites. The nutrients are needed to fuel the cell's self-protective mechanisms that gene silence, which means keep abnormal genes from being expressed, prevent methylation defects, and prevent the accumulation of toxic or carcinogenic metabolites within the cells and other noxious compounds that age us, like free radicals and AGEs, or advanced glycation end products. So this first principle of a Nutritarian diet says that your health is determined by the micronutrient bang per caloric buck, which means we want to eat a diet that has micronutrient adequacy, that has enough micronutrients in it, and not eat empty calorie foods. Because when we eat foods that have no nutrients, like white bread and flour and cookies and crackers and breakfast bars and chips and soft drinks and muffins, and we eat these foods that our cells do not have enough of these antioxidants and phytochemicals and just plain vitamins and minerals that they need. And I'm also suggesting here that a piece of chicken is like a bagel, because both the animal product and the processed carbohydrate food is low in micronutrients. They don't contain a high dose of vitamins, minerals, but mostly missing is the phytochemicals and antioxidants that we need the constant exposure to. We need constant exposure to antioxidants and phytochemicals to keep our brain and our body functioning normally. Now, one of the worst things that drives overeating behaviors, or you could say one of the major primary factors driving overeating, is this concept that I call the caloric rush. That means, just like the glycemic load, it means how many calories enter the bloodstreams quickly. So the prototypes I'm talking about are white flour and sugar and oil. because white flour is a sugar equivalent. We're going to learn there's no difference between white flour and sugar because it enters the bloodstream as a rush of sugar. So it's a highly addictive substance. Oil also enters the bloodstream very rapidly. It doesn't matter what kind of oil, avocado oil, flaxseed oil, coconut oil, olive oil, because the fat is not bound to the fiber in the food and it's squeezed out of the food and extracted, usually with toxic aldehydes and chemicals to get all the fats out of those fibers. Then the oil goes into the bloodstream very rapidly. In a natural world where humans lived 100,000, 50,000, 30,000, even 10,000 years ago, right? It's only a few thousand years people have been extracting oil from food. But the human body is not designed for that. I mean, we have oil because of the rapid calories in the blood. In a natural world, in a primitive world, we could have never gotten all those fat calories in the blood. If you're eating nuts and seeds as a source of fat, they're slowly released from the fibers, the sterols and stanols that are bind to the fat. And as they're digested over hours, these fats slowly seep into the bloodstream at 1 calorie a minute, maybe even 1.5 calories a minute, as opposed to oil, which all rushes in within the first few minutes. They say when you put oil on your food, from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat, all the oil's coming in. When calories rush into the bloodstream, the body has to rev up storage, try to get it out of the bloodstream fast, has to get the glucose out of the bloodstream, has to get the oil, the fat out of the bloodstream, and the body secretes more insulin and other fat storage hormones that push these calories into the fat supply. You can't burn it for energy because you're not burning energy that quickly. But the reason I'm bringing this up right now and right at the beginning is because it's not just about pushing up fat storage. This high rush of calories in the blood stimulates the brain. And it stimulates the brain just like a narcotic does in the opiate centers of the brain, over time making us dopamine insensitive. So our brain starts to feel flat and unsatisfied unless we try to replicate this caloric rush. And as our brain becomes more overly stimulated from all the calories entering the bloodstream, we desire more calories stimulating the bloodstream. It's like we're shooting up with a narcotic like heroin, and after a time we get tolerance to it. We want more heroin, and we want more heroin, and we want more heroin. And we want more oil, and more fried food, and more sugar, and more honey, and more maple syrup, and we want more caloric rush. And we become habituated to this caloric rush, to this chronic caloric intensity in the blood. And over time, we're not satisfied with the normal meal. You can't have like a bean burger and some broccoli and, and some with tomato sauce on it and a piece of fruit for dessert. That won't satisfy you. Where's the cheesecake? Where's the ice cream? Where's the chocolate bar? Where's the French fries? Where's the soda? You got to have something oily, greasy, sugary. You got to get that caloric rush or you feel empty from that meal. So we train our children to be little food addicts. So they're not satisfied with normal food. They have to have this hyper palatable, intense food so we start to build drug addictive, food like drug addictive eating habits. So the person could say, oh, if I had to eat like that, I'd rather be dead. Who wants to just shoot me right now, kill me right now? Who wants to? Because their whole life revolves around this drug-like addictive relationship with food, and their life is very imbalanced because they have no passion about living, about their humanity, and about their ability to like the outside world. They become more narcissistically consumed with their own need for achieving this high stimulatory relationship with food, this caloric rush. Of course, I'm saying beans and nuts are the prototype of slow foods, because beans are a high carbohydrate food like white flour is, but they take hours to go into your bloodstream, right? 1 or 2 calories a minute. Nuts have the fat and protein like oil, and as you add oil to the food, don't forget, you're diluting and removing the protein out of your diet. So if I had there are 5 categories of plant foods, right? Intact whole grains, vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds, and fresh fruit. Those are the 5 categories. They all contain protein, but one of them doesn't contain much protein. They're all kind of protein adequate except for one. And the one that's not protein adequate is fruit. So we can get our diet to be too low in protein on a plant-based diet if we overdo the fruit and exclude categories of the others, or one category or two categories or three categories. We start to just mostly. So as we narrow the assortment of food types we eat, we narrow the protein bioavailability. But the most powerful way you can reduce the protein on a plant-based diet to an unfavorable level is pouring oil on the food. Because now what are you taking away? What, a quarter of your calories? You're removing the protein from a quarter of your calories. Because you just use protein, you just use oil instead of using nuts and seeds as a source of fat, because nuts and seeds contain protein. So if you're using 400 calories, and by the way, the average American consumes 400 to 500 calories of oil a day. It's 120 calories a tablespoon. It's only 3 tablespoons, right? 3 tablespoons is like 400 calories. So we're talking about a few tablespoons of oil. You've just taken 20 grams of protein out of your diet, where you could have had that fat calories. You could have had those calories from beans or nuts. Okay, so we're saying here that this disruption of normal appetite, the appetite in your digestive tract, and the apostat in your central nervous system, the hypothalamus. And these calorically dense foods that rush into the bloodstream stimulate the brain in the absence of energy requirements, meaning that it doesn't even matter how many calories you consume. Even a small amount of calories from these foods are brain stimulatory, but they drive overeating behavior. And they result in impulsive and compulsive food intake. And the only way to restore normal brain circuitry, I'm saying they change the neurological connections in the brain. And they change the brain structure of neuropeptides and the actual neurological function and structure of the brain. And we have to restore normal brain circuitry with long-term, many months of having a low caloric rush foods. You have to get away from those drugs. You have to not snort cocaine and take heroin for months for the brain to reset its circuitry and for the dopamine centers to become more sensitive. And you have to take months of decreasing the caloric rush and getting away from these highly stimulating, instantaneously flooding the bloodstream with calories foods. And that has to be enforced long-term for people to benefit, to start to be comfortable with the right amount of calories. The goal here is for people to desire the right amount of calories and eat instinctually. So the amount of calories you feel like eating is the right amount. But it's not going to happen right away unless we take out these hyperstimulating foods, and then you're eventually going to feel comfortable with less calories over time. Now, I'm just reviewing here that sugar and flour are not a food. They act in the brain as a drug. So white flour absorbs so rapidly as sugar in the bloodstream to mimic the excursion of sugar in the bloodstream. So white flour is sugar. It's a sugar equivalent. Now, food contains nutrients that sustain life, but white flour and sugar do not have those nutrients to sustain life. They don't contain a sufficient vitamin and mineral load to sustain life. They don't even have enough vitamins and minerals to metabolize their own energy. In other words, when you turn sugar or flour into energy for the body, they utilize cofactors in the mitochondria, right? In the Krebs cycle, and when we're making energy, we utilize cofactors like vitamins and minerals, but they don't even contain the cofactors that are necessary to convert those calories into energy. So it has to strip the body of nutrients. So it's lowering the cellular concentration of nutrients as it's flooding the cells with reactive oxygen species, with free radicals that damage and age the cell. So these are anti-life. They're not foods. What is food spelled backwards? F-O-O-D would be D-O-O-F, doof. I call these foods doof, or you are a doof if you're going to eat them, because you're eating drugs, not food. So they create the disease and they accelerate death, and they lead to nutritional starvation and the buildup of metabolic toxins. And now you become a more toxic individual who's aging faster. And now you not only desire more and are habituated to overeating calories, but now if you try not to eat these foods and you cut back on them, you feel wasted, fatigued, shaky, irritable, and even angry. So the body's under attack. We lead to more deposition of fat among our muscle tissues. So that's intramyocellular lipids, means where fat, our muscle cells are being marbleized with fat. and covered with this, and every cell in the body becomes more fats in the cell membranes, overly infiltrated with fat in the cell membranes, leading to more muscle weakness and more impaired energy production, leading people feeling chronically fatigued. And they'll feel lethargic. They don't feel like moving, exercise, activity, leading to, and that combined with nutrient depletion leads to more osteopenia and sarcopenia as they age. Sarcopenia means the loss of muscle strength and muscle density with aging, and that's a normal process of aging, is to lose bone and muscle, and to lose brain size and immune function. In other words, we deteriorate as we age. Our muscles get stronger, our muscles get weaker and smaller. Our bones get weaker and smaller. Our brain gets weaker and smaller. And that's neurological senescence. And our immune system gets weaker and stronger and smaller. We don't live forever. We get increased risk of getting an infection like pneumonia as our immune system deteriorates. So the purpose of living healthfully and the purpose of my Nutritarian message is we want to derail and slow down these processes, maintain muscle and bone strength, maintain neurological size and function, and maintain immune system size and function, stabilizing stem cells, telomeres, and the ability to have that human lifespan be around 100 years old, not around 75 years old. So sugar, flour, SF, sugar, flour, IR, insulin resistance, the more the fat builds up around our cells, the more insulin resistant we become. In other words, the body's production of insulin isn't sufficient to keep the sugar to the most favorable level low enough. So the body has to produce more insulin to keep the sugar low, because the fat surrounding the cells distort the function of the insulin receptor. So now the higher level of insulin creates another factor leading to aging. Now, insulin is a primary fat storage hormone, so it drives up appetite. So when you're overweight and more insulin resistance, you're going to naturally have a bigger appetite that matches the size of your body. So an overweight, bigger person has a bigger appetite in proportion to the size of their body. So they're going to feel like eating more food because of the heightened production of insulin. And what drives that heightened insulin production is the high glycemic diet, the more sugar in the diet, and, of course, more fat on the body. So these glycemic, and by the way, insulin, not only being a fat storage hormone, it drives cellular replication. It's a factor that permissively allows cancer cells to replicate, and it promotes angiogenesis. The word angiogenesis means the growth of blood vessels to fuel the fat, because you can't grow fat on your body unless we have angiogenesis promotion, that blood vessels sprout new growth of shoots and branches and tributaries to bring oxygen and nutrients into the fat supply to grow fat on your body, allowing fat cells to replicate like a tumor. And in promoting the growth of angiogenesis, it also allows tumor cells to grow and even become cancerous, because now the tumors and the growth of abnormal cells can claim a blood supply through the angiogenesis promotion due to the heightened insulin. So glycemically unfavorable diets, meaning diets with a lot of sugar, honey, maple syrup, white rice, white bread, increase breast cancer rates by 85%, and that includes, white rice. Studies on high white rice consumption in Asian countries also show that more white rice in the diet, of course, increases risk of cancer, especially when people eat other causes of cancer on top of that, which we know, oils, fried foods, more sweets, animal products. It accelerates. So whether more unhealthy things you combine into the witch's cauldron of cancer causation, the more likely you're going to have cancer. And the meta-analysis of 39 studies show increased risk of all common cancers with diets higher in glycemically unfavorable foods. So we're also saying here that gut inflammation means brain inflammation, and the gut and the brain communicate with each other. So the sweets and meat diet, in other words, meats and potato, meat and rice, meat and bread, the hamburger, the pizza, the way Americans eat, creates the growth of unfavorable and pathogenic bacteria and yeast forms in the gut. So let's just review this one more time, because the bacteria in the gut are an important part of our control of how much we eat, because it's the breakdown of fiber and resistant starch into short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids, SCFA. It's the reduction of short-chain fatty acids by the bacterial degradation of fiber and resistant starch that has feedback loops on both the appetite and the apostat. The appetite, so the fiber, these short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate acetate, propionate, but particularly butyrate, activates the GLP-1 receptor, the same as those drugs do to stop gastric emptying, right? To slow gastric emptying, to make you feel full. And the butyrate also has a negative feedback loop with the apostat in the hypothalamus. So the gut and the brain communicate, and it registers how much food we're eating based on how much fiber we're eating and how much of these short-chain fatty acids are produced by the bacterial degradation of the fiber. And when we eat these various fibers and the assortment of various types of fiber, it builds the most favorable bacteria in the gut that creates this biofilm that covers the gut with favorable gram-positive organisms like bifidobacteria, but in any case, that slow the absorption of calories in the gut, and it particularly slow the absorption of glucose, lowering the glycemic load of your diet and lowering the caloric rush. So that means the calories enter the bloodstream more slowly when we eat these healthy fibers and have the right wide assortment of fibers that lead to the wide variety of different bacterial subspecies that are able to have live onto the villi and slow the absorption, and the support of those green vegetables and those phytochemicals support the growth of the aryl hydrocarbon receptors on the underside of the villi, supporting the growth of the intraepithelial lymphocytes, the immune system in the gut. So the immune system in the gut communicates with the bacteria in the lining of the gut, which then has an effect to produce nutrients and ease food gently into the bloodstream and to keep us feel like we're satisfied with a lower caloric load, and we're feeling better, and we're more instinctually now connected with the amount of calories we need, and we don't need to overeat. Keep in mind, Americans are consuming more than double the calories humans need. Primitive populations and healthy humans consume about, 1,400 to 1,600 calories a day. The average primitive societies consume about 1,500 calories a day, 1,600 calories a day. The average American consumes 3,300 calories a day. I make the joke and I say half of what we eat meets our needs and the other half meets the needs of our doctors. And it's almost impossible to be satisfied with a lesser amount of calories if we're not eating healthy foods and if we are eating these foods that drive addictive behavior, right? And the last thing on this slide says, shuts down gene silencing. It's just mentioning the damage to the immune system from gut inflammation and brain inflammation from this American diet, which we're consuming, the sweets and the meats at the same time, the flour and the meat and the cheese and the bread and all the stuff we eat. And so the glucose and insulin spiking suppresses immune function, suppresses surveillance, the immune system surveillance to remove abnormal cells and kill them or remove them, and it also stops gene silencing. Gene silencing is when the genes have abnormal areas that have to be suppressed. So we are what we eat. Our genes reflect what we eat. Our genes, to a lesser extent, affect our genetics because the abnormal genes are suppressed or silenced when we eat healthfully. So the brain's under attack, and what we eat affects our brain. It affects our behavior, gives us our intelligence, our compassion, and our attentiveness. So episodic high glucose, the caloric rush that overstimulates the dopamine centers of the brain, damages the brain and shrinks the brain. So the brain is going to shrink at a faster rate as we age if it's not continually exposed to antioxidants. So these lack of antioxidants from not eating berries and green vegetables and beans, and the brain is not getting the antioxidants, meaning all the processed foods and animal products, it's going to deteriorate and lose its global function. And you're not going to be the best version of yourself, the most human, intelligent, and creative version of yourself. So poor diets, junk food diets, is also the poor school performance, hyperactivity, attention deficits, impairs higher BMI, means more fat on the body, impairs executive brain function, leading to higher rate of depression and less ability to concentrate and focus on your work long term. Now, oils make this work and make this worse, and I'm making the radical, almost ridiculous claim that olive oil causes breast cancer. Now, how can I make such a ridiculous claim that olive oil causes breast cancer? Well, it's not direct, it's indirect, It's because being overweight causes breast cancer, right? Now, if you eat more oil, you have more stimulation of the brain to not be satisfied with the right amount of calories had you been eating foods that, like nuts and seeds and beans, which lower your apostat. And by the way, all the oil that rushes into the bloodstream is 100% put into fat storage. When you eat nuts and seeds as a source of fat, some of that fat is sucked out into the toilet bowl. So the fat is not all biologically absorbed. So it gives your body the sensation like it ate 200 calories, but only, let's say, 170 calories came in. So it naturally, instinctually, without effort, makes you moderately calorically restrict because you're satisfied with less calories. The same thing when you eat beans as a source of carbohydrate, because the beans are the foods with the most resistant starch, and those starches are resistant to enzymatic degradation, which means they get converted by bacteria in the gut into short-chain fatty acids. But that happens so far down in the digestive tract towards the distal portion of our small intestines and the proximal portion of our large intestines that about 85% of those calories are passed through into the toilet bowl as fat. So the carbohydrate calories in beans, some of them are turned into fat by bacteria and hit more fat in the toilet bowl. More fat in the toilet bowl means less fat on you. But of course, it means that we have to get satisfied with those 200 calories, but those 200 calories never come into the body. Part of them went into the toilet. So it makes you moderately calorically restrict. This consumption of oil is brand new in human history. Nope, it's not a primitive food. It's not a natural food. It's a completely concocted, processed, and artificial food that our bodies are not adapted to. Now, when you heat oils, they become carcinogenic because we form, by the way, the toxic aldehydes are in the oil when they're heating and putting these toxins in the oil to extract them from the food, but they also, now we cook with the oil, we heat them further, creating more rancid compounds that are toxic. And even the fumes are carcinogenic. So even if you work in a movie theater over the popcorn machines with cooking that fake butter, or you're working in a fast food restaurant around the fryers, just breathing in the smoke off the fryers, could damage your lungs, and because even the fumes are irritating and carcinogenic. And the U.S. Southern diet, where they eat more fried foods, whatever they fry everything down there, right there, they call it the stroke belt because it has the highest heart attack and stroke rate in the world, not in the country, in the world. The most number of people dying of heart attacks and strokes is right here in the United States, where people eat more fried food. And the Sydney Diet Heart Study showed vegetable oils were more dangerous than red meat for your heart. So you cook in oil, you're cooking with one of the most dangerous things you could possibly eat. And of course, it's impossible to maintain a normal weight. I could tell story after story where people try to eat healthy, they try to diet, and they have one serving a week of like something with oil. And the minute the oil comes in, it stops fat storage for days. It stops fat breakdown for days. It turns on the fat storage. And you can't lose fat, break down fat, and build fat at the same time. You're either losing fat, stabilizing fat, or building fat. And if you turn on the messengers to cause build fat, you can't expect to lose weight, even if so it makes it so it discombobulates your body's whole ability to maintain biological normalcy. So I'm claiming here that we build up these toxic metabolites in the body from eating a diet that's not rich enough in antioxidants and phytochemicals and other nutrients, micronutrients. We build up these advanced glycation end products, meaning cooked carbohydrates, low nutrient cooked carbohydrates, and overly cooked, baked, cooked foods. We have ammonia and aldehydes and all types of damaging substances in our body. And then we have external noxious substances from breathing in smoke, taking in chemicals, eating foods that are contaminated, or whatever, or just using things in our environment. So we have these xenobiotics, being exposed to mold, whatever it is. We have other things that are noxious in our external environment that adds to the toxic load that our own body produces. So we have different types of toxins. We have toxins that are metabolically produced by the body itself, the normal byproduct of living. We produce, in other words, our body produces waste products like free radicals, like lipofuscin, like advanced glycation. Our body produces waste. So that we have that buildup of those toxins that have to be removed. And then we have the toxins from the food we're eating, that we're not eating wholesome food. And then we also have the toxins from the external environment as well. And this leads to more abnormal cell surfaces. It leads to the immune system being able to recognize the cells as having noxious waste in them, which can distort the shape or function of the cell membrane. It could lead to an attack, an autoimmune attack on our own self, and the body, the immune system can recognize itself as being abnormal and attack it. So we have become hypersensitive and more inflammation. And by the way, because fat cells on the body in general get a poor blood supply, they naturally secrete more pro-inflammatory compounds because they're not getting as well oxygenated. So fat cells secrete more lipokines and cytokines and more reactive oxygen species, which then contribute to the person overreacting with an autoimmune condition, or overreacting should they get a viral infection, or having death from COVID now because the body was so toxic and so has such a pro-inflammatory state. So I'm saying this idea of toxicosis and this hyperinflammatory state interwoven with the food, the bacteria in the gut, the signals of the brain, and the immune attack on self molecules leads to, of course, myocarditis, pericarditis, thrombosis, encephalitis, memory loss, tinnitus, headaches, dizziness, brain fog, all these things people are complaining of, chronic headaches. They're naturally toxic. And so we're talking about that almost all Americans have this underlying disease of toxicosis that predisposes them to their genetic weaknesses, can be hyper-expressed, and they feel sick all the time. And fast food is addicting, and I'm calling, obviously, what I call fast food is not merely the food eaten in a fast food restaurant. It's also, anything that's digested and absorbed rapidly, like oil is fast food. But fast food and processed foods generally have multiple synthetic ingredients. They're calorically dense, right? They're nutritionally barren, they're highly flavored, and they're high in sugar and salt. And salt is a tissue irritant as well. And we'll go over that a little bit more later. But we're talking about, we don't just cause diabetes and cause heart disease from the diet. We damage the brain. Sometimes the brain is the first organ to experience symptoms. Even 2 servings a week of commercial baked goods or fast food doubles the lifetime risk of depression, right? And do people in America consume 2 servings a week of commercial baked goods like bagels and chocolate chip cookies and pizza, or fast food like French fries and burgers, and that they're eating 2 servings a week, they're eating 15 servings a week, right? So what I'm saying here is not only is our risk of depression gone up 5,000%, it used to be 1 in 500 people, now it's 1 in 5 people. So we're talking about not only is our population affecting brain overall cognition and brain function, global brain function, but our whole population, or almost our whole population, has become relatively dysthymic. Dysthymia means that you're not really depressed, you can't get out of bed and in pain, but you're really not excited about life. Your life is very flat, unappealing. You're not waking with a passion and joy of living every day with a purpose. You kind of just have to go to work to make some money so you can go imbibe in your therapeutic addictive substance for the brain, either alcohol or snorting or eating pizza or fast foods or greasy food or commercial baked goods. You just live so you can supply the brain with its overly stimulating addictive substances. So your life becomes relatively narrow, and the brain under attack. So we're going into all the way the brain is attacked. It alters its brain structure. We talked about the buildup dopamine and sensitivity, right? So now you become desirous of more dopamine. It leads to impulsive behavior, impulsive eating, where you want instant gratification. Even though it lasts for a minute, you keep desiring that instant gratification, even though it's self-destructive, and you're continuing to damage neurons, and you have decreased neuroplasticity, which means you lose the ability for highly creative thought. So now the inventor in you, the artist in you, the creative part of your brain is somewhat limited, and actually your brain starts to become more narrowly focused and actually becomes more irritable, more easily angered, more confused, more subject to false thinking and irrational thinking, right? So, and of course we know that children in the highest quintile of candy consumption in the first 10 years of life have a 60% chance of being arrested for a drug-related offense or a violent crime by the time they're 35 years old. In other words, and nothing correlates as well with criminality as does junk food consumption and candy consumption in childhood. So we damage the brain, and it affects, and people become more aggressive and make poor decisions in life. And I'm saying here that candy and sugar and junk food is the gateway drug to alcohol and more serious drug use, right? Because it starts to train the body and the brain to live for its instantaneous and impulsive stimulation, right? So you got to be crazy to eat fast food and junk food because it's highly self-destructive to your globally functioning brain and your ability to have memory and have a happy life. And so you got to be insane to eat fast food and junk food. But of course, that's the society in which we live in today, right? So reviewing some of this slide about hunger here, and there's a few different concepts of hunger. It has to do with the feeling of whether you're satiated without becoming full. We don't want to have to eat till we're full to feel satisfied. If we have to stretch the stomach out to eat till we feel full, then we've eaten. And if we need to feel full by stretching it, if we need to eat to fullness, then we're a food addict. Because if we have the normal signals of satiety being met by a healthy diet, then we feel satisfied without having to eat to fullness or to pain or to discomfort. Now, true hunger is a feeling of sensation in the upper chest and lower neck, right in this area of the body. But what happens is people aren't in touch with true hunger. They're not healthy enough to feel hungry, and they're all chronically overeating. Why should they ever feel hungry? They have 40 pounds of extra fat on the body. Why should they ever feel hungry? They have a reserve of food right on their body. But real hunger protects our lean body mass from becoming too low. And we get hungry when there's a need for calories, feel right over here. But what happens is, and we have to recognize this if we're going to have these potent strategies to lose weight, we have to recognize and understand the difference between true hunger and what I call toxic hunger, or this artificial hunger that results from withdrawing from toxic substances. So our glucose curve goes up when we eat a meal, right? And it continues to travel upwards. And we maybe stop eating, as the curve is going up. But as the glucose is absorbed from that meal, then it goes back to our baseline level because all that glucose that came in is stored as glycogen. Some of it may be stored as fat, but it's stored as glycogen. And now the body keeps the glucose curve flat, by burning off the glycogen that was stored during that meal and when we're not eating anymore. But when the liver is storing glycogen, it can't detoxify and repair and deconjugate fat-soluble toxins to make them water-soluble for excretion in the kidney. So the liver is doing its job, but the job it does in the eating phase is not the same job it's doing in the catabolic phase when you're not eating. So the liver's ability to detoxify and remove noxious elements is enhanced in the catabolic phase of the digestive cycle. So, excuse me one second. Sorry about that. Okay, so getting back to this concept of the detox phase is that when you finish digesting food and you enter the detox phase, then the liver actively is involved in circulating and removing toxins, people feel ill. So what I'm saying is healing, detoxification is enhanced. And that's when enhancement of detoxification occurs when you're not eating. And people feel fatigued, shaky, weak, stomach cramping, headaches, irritable, right? And I call that toxic hunger. It's not hunger, it's detox. And it makes people want to overeat because they're uncomfortable feeling those things. They want to eat again. When they didn't burn up the glycogen that was stored from the prior meal, there's no biological need for calories. So you have to overeat to minimize the detox when your body is highly toxic and chronically overeating. Now, had you been eating a healthy diet for a long period of time, your level of metabolic wastes are low enough so you don't feel any symptoms of toxic hunger. And then, of course, you can wait till the glycogen is burnt up. And then, of course, you're going to feel true hunger, which will direct you to the right amount of calories. Because if you continue not to eat after all the glycogen is gone, then you would start to burn up muscle tissue. And the body doesn't want to burn up muscle tissue for energy. It wants to bring food in so you can stabilize your muscle and bone. So true hunger becomes a precise computer directing you to the exact amount of calories to eat each day to sustain and retain muscle and skeletal mass, not to put fat on the body. If you put fat on the body or excessive fat on the body, you had to have eaten outside of the demands of true hunger due to recreational eating or toxic hunger. And you're not just putting a little extra fat, you're not just eating a little extra calories. I'm saying the Americans are eating thousands of extra calories a day, right? And when you eat a little extra calories over your basal metabolic needs, then your body is speeding up its metabolism to try to burn up those calories. So you're speeding up your metabolism to burn up your calories, and you're aging faster because a faster metabolic rate means you're aging faster, and your body's engine is revving at a higher rate. You're revving your engine at a higher rate as you're eating more calories because the extra calories you eat don't go into food. They don't go into the body's fat stores. The extra calories you eat both goes into raising thyroid function, raising body temperature, raising the calories burned through breathing. Your body sets into motion a series of biological events that tries to burn off the extra calories so it doesn't put fat on you, but you're making that pact with the devil because you're taking off lifespan at the end of life as you raise your metabolic rate. See, most people think it's favorable to raise the metabolic rate so they can eat more food and not get fat. But we know the opposite is true. It's favorable to slightly undershoot our caloric needs, so we keep a much thinner body with lower body fat percentages. So then the body is aging slower. We want to eat as little as we can without getting too thin, not as much as we can without getting fat. So the most proven concept to slow aging is just that slight bit of undereating or maintain a good muscle to fat ratio, lower body fat stores. So we're saying that there's no such thing as an overweight, healthy person because they're aging faster due to the extra calories they consumed, revving up their engine, making them age faster. So toxic hunger leads to overeating, and people want to go on to eat either a big heavy meal, like if having cheeseburgers and French fries and meats and heavy foods, they take many, many hours to digest. And the many hours to digest these meals means that you go from one catabolic phase of digestion to another catabolic phase of digestion. You just move you keep digesting and digesting and digesting, and the longer you live in the anabolic cycle, the faster you're aging your body. We want to have catabolic interludes so the body can keep repairing from the last meal. And the longest longevity occurs when we have the largest catabolic interlude at nighttime. And that means eating an earlier and lighter dinner, so you're sleeping in the catabolic phase when you're not digesting food all night, because your body is healing and repairing the in the catabolic phase, you're not digesting food. And enhancement and healing and repair and removing of free radicals is enhanced during sleep. So we get the most benefit from the sleep when we're not digesting food during our sleep. So we want to, of course, finish the meals, finish digesting the food for the day by like 4 hours before we go to bed at night. And we don't want, and even if we finish digesting 4 hours before we go to bed at night, if we overeat that last meal, we're still going to be digesting food into the sleep cycle, which is not good for our long-term health. So we're talking here about most Americans are driven to overeat by toxic hunger, and diets don't work. Diets don't work because you can't cut back on calories while there's an overwhelming and unrelenting drive to overconsume calories because of toxic hunger and because of all the buildup of metabolic waste and because of the caloric rush stimulating the brain. So diets don't work because people have to have a really rich understanding of what controls their appetite and their apostat in order to have them desire the right amount of food. And that's what we're talking about here. And we're talking about these symptoms that most people think are hunger, like headaches and weakness and stomach cramping and lightheadedness and growling and irritable and hangry. These are not hunger symptoms. These are symptoms that people get who don't live or eat healthy enough, because these symptoms go away when you live on a very healthy diet, and that puts people back in touch instinctually to desire the right amount of calories. Like for me, I don't feel I'm on a caloric restricted diet. I eat the amount of calories I feel like eating, but the amount of calories I feel like eating is the right amount. I don't even feel like overeating or even excess calories, because I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel as well by overeating. I feel like I had enough, and that's the right amount of food for me. And that's what we're trying to drive for. We're trying to instruct people and teach them that if they live a healthy life and they eat a healthy enough diet, it will put them instinctually connected with the right amount of calories to maintain their lean body mass. As long as we now teach them, we've got to work on their brain too, to get rid of this cycle of addictive thinking and addictive behavior, right? So to get rid of toxic hunger, we're explaining why diets don't work, because people don't get enough volume and fiber, because the volume includes the space occupying ability of the water content high fiber food, which occupies space and weight in the stomach without feeling full. But we're also talking about chew volume here. Chew volume means how much time does it take to chew that food? Like if we mix together raw vegetables with cooked vegetables, and also, by the way, if you mix together green vegetables, raw vegetables, beans, and some nuts in the meal, it has an effect to delay gastric emptying. The full mix of the coordination of beans, nuts, and vegetables slows gastric emptying, makes you feel satisfied for long periods of time in between meals. So you're not desirous of snacking or eating in between meals. So snacking is overeating. It's recreational eating. It's addictive eating. It's self-destructive eating. We should eat only when we're really hungry, or only when there's a real need for biological need for calories, which means that your body needs rest from the prior meal to restore the ability for the holocrine glands that secrete digestive enzymes to build up the enzymes for the next meal to digest it properly. We can't just be putting in food all day long and expect to have good digestion. We need rest, we need digestive rest between meals. And we have to seek fiber and nutrients and volume and chew volume to be able to satisfy our appetite and our apostat, right? And animal protein, because of the buildup of nitrogenous wastes, and like urea and uric acid and ammonia and sugar and caffeine, feed toxic hunger. It means you feel more withdrawal symptoms when you try to stop those things. So that's why we're trying to get the person instinctually to feel true hunger, which takes some time. And I'm reiterating this concept that when we eat healthfully, right, and we have this assortment of fibers, particularly the assortment of fibers from raw vegetables and raw greens, and raw onion and scallion, and cooked beans and cooked mushrooms, from those four foods, we support the growth of the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, which then builds a robust connection of interepithelial lymphocytes behind the villi in the small intestines and covers the overcoating of the villi with the microbiome. So this has the effect to most normally create a normal appetite, to create a slow excursion of food into the bloodstream, making us feel sustained with less calories between meal, and also to enable a highly functioning immune system, because the small intestinal brush border with its intraepithelial lymphoid tissue underlying it, are the defenders at the gates of the castle, our first line of defense against viruses, bacteria, and toxins, right? So maintaining this, preventing inflammation in the gut is critically important, and we do that by eating healthy food. So here's a study published in 2010, which showed that 90% of people following this high fiber, high vegetable, eating these foods had a changed perception of hunger within 6 months. They felt hunger. They originally said they felt hunger in the head and the stomach, and now they felt hunger. And I've noticed this and been recording this, and people have been recognizing this for decades, right? That Americans have this overly driven desire to consume hunger, and what the people think is hunger and what the medical textbooks describe as hunger is not hunger. That's an abnormal or pathological type of hunger, right? So to review these dark faces of addiction here is that the dopamine stimulation of the brain leads to cravings. People who don't have this caloric rush don't lead to food cravings. The food cravings come from excessive caloric rush in the bloodstream from eating oil and sugar and honey and maple syrup and these things that rush in the bloodstream too rapidly. When we move our diet to a healthy diet, we're going to have withdrawal symptoms like fatigue and headaches and irritable. And also, when you take away a person's addictive substances and you remove their brain stimulation, it could make them more irritable and more angry and produce a negativity bias. A negativity bias means they're looking to complain about everything, looking to be irritated by things outside of themselves. They're more irritable. And of course, this highly palatable diet people are eating that's overly stimulated with salt and sugar and spice, heavily spiced and heavily flavored, and with so much calories, weakens the taste buds. So now natural foods don't taste as good. And so people are now chronically unsatisfied unless they're pathologically overfed. Unless they are eating an abnormal amount of food, they're not satisfied. They won't like the meal. They won't be satisfied with the meal. They have to be chronically overfed. They're emotionally dependent on dangerous foods. And now addicts behave irrationally and destructive to themselves and others because the primitive brain's desire to be stimulated is stronger than the cerebral brain's ability to think in your own best interests. The primitive brain takes over your thinking, and this person who's an addict, so driven to consume these self-destructive substances, doesn't care if they hurt themselves, and that drive becomes so powerful, and they lose sympathy and empathy with other people, and they don't care if they hurt other people. They can lie, cheat, steal. They're not going to be the best parent. In the food addiction is not as obviously as powerful as drug addictions, but it's still a form of addiction, and the person is still more narcissistically consumed with meeting their own needs for its brain stimulation, which takes them away from their ability and the brain and global brain functioning to be the best compassionate, with the best human with passions outside and interests outside of the self. So the food addiction makes people inherently more narcissistically consumed with meeting their own needs for self-destructive substances. And now they become less productive. And that means less productive in producing things that benefit humanity. But they're more interested in their own internal needs. And we have a whole nation of people who are politically and socially indoctrinated into meeting their own selfish needs. And they're more angered and they have sabotaging thoughts that are easily confused. They think illogically, they can think they're going to attack the Capitol and change the outcome of an election because they're going to go over have the power to do that. They think illogically, irrationally, and in a very angered way. And we saw this after the Civil War, and I wrote a book about this called Fast Food Genocide, showing how unhealthy eating leads to lowering of the global brain functioning, and you can behave in a manner that's not in your own best interest, and behave irrationally, illogically, and be subjugated to having thoughts that are illogical, that don't make sense. And most people, of course, we have a nation of food addicts. Do we eat larger amounts than do you eat more or less than you anticipate eating? Do you eat larger amounts of food than are better for you? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about food? Do you experience cravings? Does overeating interfere with work, home life, sleeping, discomfort with digestion? Do you desire to eat foods that are damaging your health? Well, most people would have to answer yes to a lot of these questions because they know that the major cause of death in the United States is heart attacks and strokes, right? And we have a sub-epidemic of cancer underlying that, the result of this food addictive behavior with eating self-destructive food. The addiction doesn't want to die. The primitive brain takes a life of its own. The subconscious mind hates change, and emotional eating doesn't make your emotions better, doesn't help solve the problems in your life. It makes your emotions worse. You can't solve the stresses in your life. You can't handle the problems in your life and make them better when you're an addict, because the addictive behaviors make you less able to globally problem solve. And you become more, so it's like falling back into your own addictive habits is the cause of the stress in your life, not the solution to it. Because people will say, oh, if you had the stresses in my life, in your life, or you have in my life, you would smoke too, right? You would snort too, or you would go to the bagel stop, or, bring home bagels and donuts too if you had the stresses. I need these to relieve my stress. Not the relief of your stress, it's the cause of your stress. So an excuse is no excuse. The addictive mind thinks of excuses. That's what the addictive mind does. It thinks of rationalizations. The addictive mind gets to the airport with no food in their backpack. So now they have to say, and there was no conscious thought of getting to the airport. So you'd have to say, oh, there's nothing to eat. I'll have to have the chocolate chip cookies. I'll have to eat a piece of pizza. I'll have to buy a bagel. right? There's nothing else to eat. So I got to eat that stuff, or I got to eat the food they serve on the planet. I don't have any, but only the addict would have put themselves in that position to require that excuse, because the non-addict would have planned ahead, right? So the brain of the addict is almost unconsciously trying to self-sabotage and allowing itself to have excuses. And every excuse the brain can think up of, it'll think of to try to get rid of its ability. When people hear us discuss nutritional excellence, they're thinking that this sounds very scientific or valuable, interesting, but they think they can't do it. It's not for me, it's for somebody else. And they can't do it because of the negative thoughts in their own brain, because their own primitive brain doesn't want to give up. It's an addictive love affair with these self-destructive brain-stimulating substances, right? So people come up with excuses. Oh, I can't lose weight no matter what I do. I've tried to do that. I cut back. It doesn't work. I don't lose weight. My family won't let me eat this way. Everybody has different opinions. It's all conflicting information. I don't know who to believe. I'll just eat what I want to eat, or just moderation. Everything in moderation. All, snort and drink and consume poisons in moderation. That's okay, right? So I'm saying something a little bit really different here, even radical. I'm saying overeating, to solve it, to have the strategies to really solve it and give people the power to get over it. This is an ethical dilemma. Because when you have poor self-esteem, it makes being different from other people more uncomfortable. You're not going to get the approval from other people when you're eating a healthy diet based on salads and vegetables and beans and nuts, and you're not going to eating the right amount of food and the right amount. We're talking here about eating the right type of food and the right amount of food and the right timing of the food, right? Chewing it really well, being mindful of what you're eating, respecting the body's needs for nutrients by eating foods that contain the nutrients humans need. And I'm saying you can't change your weight permanently unless you change your thinking about life, because this addictive relationship that was developed with food changes the brain. And you can't just change the food. We have to change the brain to be able to change the food. And by changing the food, because it gives us that negativity bias, we have to develop a positivity bias to be able to have the body be satisfied with less calories. We have to intentionally think of how to think to develop a way of using our brain to oppose the takeover of the primitive brain by addictive substances. So we have to this requires some ongoing learning and growth. It's not enough just to learn about what to eat. We have to build self-esteem with compassion for others. We have to try to build feeling that we don't, by building our internally generated self-esteem and not being dependent on externally generated self-esteem, we can reestablish more normal neurological connections in the brain and reduce our desire to overeat. Because if you want to change your diet and want to eat healthy, we've tracked people that have succeeded and people who have not succeeded. And most people don't succeed, even after they learn this information. They don't succeed because after a while, they feel that they're getting too much pressure from their family, from their friends, from their coworkers, from their social network, which gives them so much negative impact or so much negative feedback, right? That they feel uncomfortable being different. And so if they're a follower, if they're getting their self-esteem by requiring the approval of other people. And by the way, in American society, we're cultivated, our emotional well-being and our socialization process, we cultivate externally causes of self-esteem. We want to make the most money. We want to look the best. We want to have people look up. We want to get the most likes on Facebook. We want to be approved of. All these superficial things that people go after in this country, in the modern world, looking for other people to approve of them, going after externally, the power of externally generated self-esteem, which is like the power of junk food stimulation of the brain. It's not good for your health. It's an unending pit of a vicious, pit that never ends. You just keep wanting more and more of it, right? It doesn't make you ever be satisfied with it. It's the internally generated self-esteem that makes a person feel satisfied. So externally generated self-esteem is junk food for the soul. internally generated self-esteem is health food for the soul. And we need to build our internally generated self-esteem to diminish the importance and need for the externally generated self-esteem, which is going to take away your ability to live healthfully and be comfortably being different from other people. So we're all important. All people have tremendous value and are equally important. And our own happiness comes from being useful to the world at large and feeling we're more powerful than, and we're more important than us just meeting our own individual needs. As we work towards and get interrelated with people outside of ourselves, we become more powerful and feel better about our own internally generated self-esteem as we do something, have some passion and desire to do good for the world, to be useful to other people, or use our creativity to have goodwill for others. So as we look for things outside of ourselves to appreciate and become less consumed with our own need for ego glorification, we become more at peace, long-term at peace with ourselves, and we don't require other people to approve of us. And when we don't require other people to approve of us, and we start looking, generating, opposing the negativity bias, building the positivity bias, then we become more powerfully enabled to eat a healthy diet and be connected with the right amount of calories, and to defuel the power of the primitive brain that sucks us into this whirlpool of overeating. So we're looking here to build internally generated self-esteem by expanding our creative goodwill without expectation of outcome. So let me explain this just for a second here. Because what I'm saying is, a person says to me, oh, if I had to eat that way, I'd rather be dead. So now what's my response going to be based on? Is it going to be based on my ego, where I'm going to try to protect my ego and have a comeback so I can feel superior to them, or they can put them down in some way? Or is that my goal, to feel that I'm superior in some way? Because that's not going to generate your own personal happiness. Or is my goal to think of how I can use my creative intelligence to possibly have the potential of being useful in some way to this other person? So now that my goal is to be useful, and I'm taking my own ego out of the equation, I can first show that I care about this person in some way. In some way, small way, I can show they mean something to me, and their happiness means something to me. And if I can cultivate a relationship where I show them some interest in them, I might be able to have a positive effect on them. They might be able to more listen to what I have to say that might benefit them in some way. But it doesn't really, if they benefit or they don't benefit, my own internally generated self-esteem, I'm doing good for myself because I have the intent to have creative goodwill for them, even if it doesn't work, or maybe it works. Maybe I'm laying the groundwork that something may work a year or 10 years from now may help them. But me being consistent with my own walking the walk I talk, me being consistent with my own diet, my own behavior, being the right role model, is an important part of me being able to influence others in a favorable fashion, because they're not going to be affected positively if I'm not somebody they respect, or if I'm not following my own, behaving myself in a manner that's beneficial to myself. So we expand our creative goodwill without the expectation of outcome. We look for the opportunities to show small doses of kindness whenever we can. And we appreciate the world around us, like seeing value and beauty in everything around us, trying to look at the world with a positive viewpoint. So we're building our ability to like the outside world and not build our own personal power and personal superiority. It's appreciating things outside of ourselves. So what I'm saying right now is, in order to eat a diet that's extremely helpful, and to stay with the right caloric load and the right foods made to taste delicious, of course, through the right recipes, we still eat a great tasting diet. But in order to stay with this long term and not yo-yo your weight and not use food recreationally, and to get rid of our addictive relationship with food, we need robust emotional health. So the training is not just about eating for nutritional health. It's how to build emotional health in parallel to the study of nutritional science. So we need diligence and consistency in our thinking. We have to take the initiative to start, the initiative to start means you have to learn and to study and to learn more about this. And then becomes the repetition and perseverance to performing right behaviors over and over again. And sometimes it helps to abstain. You need help sometimes from family, friends, or to abstain from things that are self-destructive. Announce to the world, I am doing this. We're trying to have people develop this new identity as a nutritarian. I think that's a great word, nutritarian, because it expresses the fact that we're predominantly plant-based, but also we're picking out healthy foods to eat on this plant-based diet, not just plant-based and not just whole food plant-based. It's making the diet to have the diversity, the inclusion of healthy foods, the anti-cancer G-bombs, the greens and the onions and the mushrooms, to eat a diet with a diverse amount of foods, with enough nutrient exposure. We're trying to, live in a healthy manner, but we're trying to have this identity and pride and build our internally self-esteem from being a nutritarian, right? So now we're thinking about the everyday practice of how we can like the world outside of ourselves, look for things to like in the world, look for the aesthetic structure, the beauty of the world around us, the importance of nature, of protecting our natural environment of this planetary vehicle we all share. What am I grateful for? Looking for things that you're grateful for, looking for the goodness, not looking for things to be irritated by, to be annoyed by, to be irritated by, to complain about, and to be angry about with somebody else, but looking for what you can be grateful for and what you appreciate. So every day you have an opportunity to express kindness and compassion, and you can look for that. Because I'm saying that the addictions take away your empathy and make you more narcissistically consumed with your own self. So to get rid of addiction, you have to get rid of the narcissistic bent on collecting, on stimulating our own brain. So your contentment and your long-term peace in life and our emotional strength is based on this ability to use our creativity and intelligence to have goodwill for others. And that's the missing ingredient that will help you be compliant with eating a healthy diet. Because being a healthy diet will magnify your ability to do this. It'll magnify your ability to do this in both your ability to think clearly, but also in your ability to be a role model for others. And I'm saying the consistent overlapping, you can say, what are the overlapping consistent effects of people who've succeeded in losing large amounts of weight, 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 150 pounds, and keeping off for decades. And they consistently show these people, they felt that they've gained some superpower. And they're people now who feel that they don't need the approval of, now they're getting their own internally generated self-esteem, not from their achievement, but from their increased ability to be a role model for other people because of what they've achieved themselves. And their ability to feel they're a role model has enhanced their own internally generated self-esteem. We see that ubiquitously across the board with people who've lost a lot of weight and kept it off. So I'm saying that we have to shut down the primitive brain's primitive desire to be self-destructive. And and of course, to do that, you have to shut down the need for other people's approval. So it takes a new mindset to overcome habitual bad eating and overeating, right? I know I'm intentionally going over this in more depth and more slowly because it's very important to grasp this, that we all have our stresses and struggles, and we all have our desire for instant gratification, and the primitive desire for instant gratification, for power, and for making less of the outside world, and this idea of trying to build up our own egos and this sensitive, affective feeling we're so important. It's innate in almost all of us, but we have to recognize it to minimize it, and we have to maximize what opposes that, and the things that oppose that, the gratitude, the goodwill, these things that oppose it also are going to oppose the brain's need for instant stimulation and instant gratification, right? So your cerebral brain can master control over the primitive brain's desire to eat junk food when we have this larger purpose that fuels our contentment and peace in life. So your cerebral mind can do this if we build this with practice. We have to practice the power of the cerebral brain's ability to control the primitive brain's desire for instant gratification and neuronal stimulation, right? So why behave or why do anything not in our own best self-interest? And the reason we put things in our mouth that self-destruct, and we want to eat pizza and donuts and fried foods and sweets, right? Well, we want to do something that's going to hurt our survival. We want to do that because we're going for instant gratification. And it doesn't, even if we feel a bit worse after. And what I'm saying is we have to have a different outlook on life, to be different from other people, and to lose the desire to go after such instant gratification, because the long-term gratification is so much stronger and is so much more powerful. So the ego, this constant ego battle between the the body's primitive brain desire of addiction and the ego are constant in battle, right? And this battle to find flaws outside of the self, to complain about things, right? And the ego finds a way to be unhappy. And this unhappy withdrawal from the outside world to just so that we can get into ourselves and be and our own selfish needs is the driver of all addiction. So I'm just saying the positivity heals, and we oppose this negativity thinking with positivity thinking. So we have to practice positivity thinking. We have to keep a notebook, perhaps. We have to look every hour for things we appreciate in the world around us that are outside of ourselves, right? We have to consciously be mindful of the ego's desire to protect itself and be on its own, and to negate the value of the outside world by focusing on the outside world and things we can be grateful for. So we have to appreciate things outside of ourselves. We have to look for opportunities to be useful for other people, to develop our passion in life. We have to seek out our daily likes with the eyes of an artist, looking for things that look beautiful around us. And we have to build emotional health to enable our ability to be comfortable as a nonconformist, as a longevity enthusiast. And that's the secret sauce needed to successfully lose weight. So this leads to a more powerful you, a happier you, right? We're building a wiser you, because the more healthy your brain gets, as you age, you become more wise with your lifetime accumulation of learning, as opposed to your brain shrinkage and becoming more, losing your memory and losing your ability to think logically due to your destruction of brain function with addictive and dangerous food. So eating healthfully sets you up for success, and you can accomplish a lot in life. And you can accomplish this desire you have to be the best version of yourself, because we all have that desire to be the best version, the healthiest version of ourselves that's in good shape with our full mental and physical faculties. And now's the time to do it, and to do it right. So diets fail. The reason diets mostly fail, but they don't have to fail. This is not hard to make a diet succeed, but you have to look at all these aspects and understand the science here. So nutritional inadequacy makes a diet fail. If you don't eat enough healthy food, you're going to fail. If you cut back calories too much, you're going to fail, because your the neurotic and food addicted brain is going to more obsess about food and want to binge on stimulating food. So, overly cutting back calories, even intermittent fasting with calorie days that are too low, or even juice fasting, in many cases water fasting, is not good for long-term success for people who are overweight or food addicts, because it makes them want to yo-yo their weight and bring them and shoot their metabolism too high and too low. We want to develop emotional stability, brain stability, and dietary stability. We want you to be the artist scientists that modulates the health of what you're eating and adjusts the caloric intake to the level that has you lose 2 to 3 pounds a week if you're overweight. And if you're not losing weight, you can modulate the diet to a few 50 calories less, perhaps. But what happens is when you eat this healthfully, you're comfortable eating that amount of calories without feeling like you're starving or uncomfortable. When you're eating a conventional diet, it becomes impossible to habituate yourself to be comfortable with the right amount of calories, because the desire to overeat calories is too powerful and can't be ignored. A person becomes this calorie eating, I say a calorie eating monster. They just are unsatisfied unless they overeat and eat unhealthy food. So the Nutritarian diet here, and the way of thinking we're talking about here, gives us the ability to eat the right amount of calories. It doesn't guarantee it. A person could still stress eat, emotionally eat, and eat for emotional reasons and want to overeat healthy food or overeat high concentrated caloric foods too much, or snack on too many nuts, or whatever. You can still do things wrong. But it gives us the ability to do things right. And when you eat unhealthily, it's almost impossible to do things right. So here we have the possibility of putting things in your corner so this can work for you. So the lack of green vegetables, also the high intake of green vegetables, is a secret sauce to give you a strategy to, and especially when you mix both raw and cooked green vegetables in the meals, like a salad with some cooked green vegetable at dinner, or some raw vegetables you chew, like carrots, jicama, raw peppers, snow pea pods, with like a little sauce, and then you have some cooked vegetables in a dish as well. It's this combination of sufficient vegetables to give those volumes and fibers. And diets fail because of the use of concentrated calories like oils and flours and sweets that drive the caloric rush. You can't succeed on a diet like that. The reason we're taking oil out of the diet, even though it is mostly because people are overweight, right? And they're not going to succeed when they're stimulating fat storage. And susceptibility to peer pressure is a major reason that people can't succeed on a healthy diet. So we have to be able to internally generate self-esteem and not be exposed to the need for externally generated self-esteem. We have to lose this American, modern European, this modern world style of looking for other people's approval and trying to go after power. And people fail because there's no period of enforced abstinence. The desire for addictive substances lessens every day, week, and month. You're not taking it in. When you keep cheating, or when you don't have a clear boundary, and you keep on the weekends going for alcohol when you're an alcoholic, it stimulates your desire to keep wanting alcohol. When you keep having pizza or fried foods or oily foods or greasy foods or sugary foods, it lights the fire under your desires and keeps it lit. And you don't slowly see that fire burning out where you no longer desire those foods. The goal is to see that stuff as being poisonous. Why would I ever want to drink a soda or have something that's so unhealthy and feel sick? You couldn't get 10 men to tie me down and to force that stuff in my mouth. I don't see it as something desirous. And neither would you, with a long enough period of time away from the food, building your taste muscle to like healthy food and feeling how good you feel and can think, you will lose your desire for those foods with enough period of abstinence. So this period of enforced abstinence means that you clear the stuff out of your neighbor, out of your house, and you announce to the world, your own world around you, that you're making this change, and you're asking for other people's assistance and not for them to sabotage you. And you want to be able to feel that you can do this, and you can, obviously you can, but it takes some training and practice, and you have to practice thinking and living in the right manner, and it gets easier and easier the longer you keep doing it. So recurrent going on and off, makes this more difficult. So we're talking about being mindful. We're talking about pausing and thinking before acting. Step back and consider the consequences, whatever you do. You don't have to react to a negative input or insult, because it doesn't matter, because that doesn't affect you. What affects you is how you react, not how somebody reacted to you. That affects them. That's a consequence of who they are, not a consequence of who you are, right? So you don't have to react to protect your ego. But now, do you think adequately of everything that goes in your mouth? And are you mindful that you're behaving, acting, speaking, and eating in your own best interest? So you have to behave in what's best for you. So you have to think about that before you behave, before you eat. Think about it before you put it in your mouth. Is this in my own best interest, right? Loving yourself and caring for yourself means not only eating the best foods, it means behaving in a manner that's in your own best, long-term best interest as well. So we want you to be mindfully appreciative, and having gratitude for the beauty and the healing power of the food on your plate, even for the beauty of how it's prepared or could look on the plate, even the beauty and appreciation, gratitude for who is the person who helped grow the food or pick the food for us on the plate, to put the frozen wild blueberries in that frozen box. Who sat there and picked all those wild blueberries for me? That person who helped me make this beautiful food that has all these wondrous, miraculous nutrients that have this symbiotic relationship with our human cells to give us life and to give us good health. And the beauty of having us to have good health when we eat good, healthy, natural foods. And we're connected to the world around us. So a nutritarian diet, obviously, is a diet rich in vegetables, a vegetable-based diet, not a grain-based diet. And of course, the standard American diet is not even a whole grain-based diet. It's based on processed grains. That's a chemical. That's not a food. It's doof. It's a doof-based diet based on white flour and sugar and oil, right? Most calories on the American diet comes from things that shouldn't even be considered food because they don't contain a significant micronutrient load and they're addictive substances. So a nutritarian diet is the name for a diet that's nutritionally adequate because it contains a large amount of anti-cancer, lifespan enhancing, right, and brain protective nutrients with lots of beans and greens and nuts and we don't use oil as a caloric load, and animal products are restricted or eliminated because obviously it's not just the contamination of animal products, they don't contain the phytochemicals, but they also contain substances that accelerate aging. So we're looking to eat as much as possible the foods that are best for our body long term, right? Nutrient dense calories to make our cells nutrient dense. And as you lose weight, by the way, with every pound that you lose, your cells become more nutrient dense because the load of nutrients carried in your body's vessel, right? You're a vessel that's holding nutrients and a vessel that's holding toxins. And every pound you lose, you're breaking down and removing toxins from the fat supply, but you're also concentrating the nutrients in the remaining cells that make you up. So when you lose a third of your body weight, you've concentrated those nutrients into each cell significantly to extend lifespan. So we have to repeat correct habits over and over again, like you're learning a sport, how to swing a golf club correctly or something. You want to swing it in the right way over and over again so it comes like memory without effort, right? So your breakfast is generally, so we're looking at repetition of correct habits. So we make this dietary skeleton that people could apply to their own life. And so they don't have to think and be too creative. They can just repeat this day in and day out till they get it down. So the breakfast might be a cup of fruit, predominantly berries, with a half a cup of intact whole grain like amaranth or quinoa or steel-cut oats, with 1 or 2 tablespoons of ground seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds, with some unsweetened plant milk. A simple breakfast, right? And then we move on to lunch. And lunch is a large salad of raw vegetables with raw onion and scallion or tomatoes and peppers and lettuce. And lettuce is a superfood, by the way. Lettuce is a superfood that contains the sulfoquinavose that supports the growth of the healthy bacteria that build the right microbiome. And the combination of lettuce with the cruciferous greens like arugula or watercress or bok choy or kale also supplies the right formula that builds the health of the immune system under the gut wall that we talked about, right? So the right type of food leads to the right type of bacteria, which leads to the right type of apostat and appetite to curtail your desire to overeat. So you have this large salad at lunch with some vegetable, bean, and mushroom soup. If you want to put some dried mushrooms or fresh mushrooms in the soup, it's even better. So a bowl of soup and 1 or 2 pieces of fruit for dessert. And then dinner, you have some raw vegetables to supply the gastric, to satisfy you, because we want to have the chew volume. Remember the chew volume? So it might be raw jicama, raw carrots, raw peppers, raw snow pea pods, whatever raw vegetables you did not eat at lunch, you might add to your dinner with a dip, like a salsa dip or a guacamole dip or a hummus dip or the salad dressing you used for lunch. Then with a cooked vegetable dish, a mixed cooked vegetable dish. And it could not be an attacked whole grain. We often put the bed of wok, like Thai curry sauce vegetables with broccoli or cabbage or onion and mushrooms and straw mushrooms and shiitake mushrooms. And, we make this dish made with snow pea pods or bamboo shoots or water chestnuts. We make an Asian dish with a Thai curry sauce, maybe, and we put that on a bed of spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash is a great weight loss food, and we use lots of eggplant and roasted peppers and these thin artichokes and asparagus and lots of volume of green vegetables that are rich in protein and make you feel satisfied, that are low in calories. It's easy to lose weight without eating thimble-sized portions of food because you're eating larger portions of foods that satisfy you without having to, while you still can lose pretty large amounts of weight. People that are here come to our retreat in San Diego, It's normal for males to lose 20 to 25 pounds the first month and females to lose 15 to 20 pounds the first month. And then it slows down the second month because they lost a lot of water weight the first month, but then it might slow down to 10 or 15 pounds a month. But it's normal to, and so we're saying that you're a nutritarian if you're eating healthfully at your ideal weight, or you're a nutritarian if you're eating healthfully and moving in the direction of your ideal weight by at least 2 pounds a week. Because if you're not losing weight each week, then you're not doing it right. You're doing something wrong, and something needs to be tweaked. Because remember I told you earlier that when you have fat on the body, it raises inflammation, it raises angiogenesis promotion, it raises insulin resistance, it raises estrogen, creating breast and prostate cancer. That, in other words, fat on the body increases risk of, but increases risk of clot, the ability of blood to clot and have a heart attack. These parameters go down. These measurable parameters, the ability to have a heart attack as you're losing weight. You don't have to wait till all the weight is lost to see benefits. We see the HSCRP, the inflammation coming down, the insulin resistance coming down, the diabetes going away while the person is still overweight. As long as they're losing more than 2 pounds a week, we're seeing these parameters start to fix themselves. But if they came and they lost 50 pounds and went back to buffets at Vegas or on a cruise ship and gained weight back again, you would immediately see the unhealthy parameters start to go up again. So they may have lost 50 pounds. If they gained back 10 with unhealthy eating, they're worse off than they were when they were 40 pounds heavier, because it's the direction of travel that determines the pro-inflammatory or risks of your diet. So we don't want to yo-yo the weight, because the regain of weight rapidly is putting more saturated fat and putting on fat more viscerally. And as you put more fat on viscerally that's more saturated, it raises cholesterol more. So we want to take off the subcutaneous and the visceral fat and not regain weight. It's only good to diet and lose weight if you keep it off or continue on the process towards your ideal weight, right? It's no good to temporarily lose weight and gain it back again. So we're trying to have people learn how to make changes that they can live with for the rest of their life. So this is the repetition of correct habits. It needs the attitude of a champion, where you need perseverance, repetition, and consistency, right? And learn how to enjoy living healthfully. And dessert is important. You know why dessert's important? Because we can pick a dessert like some frozen cherries or some, whatever I'm choosing to eat dessert, some partially defrosted mango or whipped banana with a little plant milk into a little fluffy ice cream with maybe a few walnuts in there. I can eat a dessert at night which marks the end of eating for the day. It tells me I've had enough food for today. I could stop eating at 5 o'clock or 5:30 or 6 o'clock, but preferably it's better to eat a lighter and earlier dinner, and you have the dessert, you shut down the restaurant, meaning the kitchen, you shut down the kitchen, you stay out of the kitchen, you clean your teeth, water picking and flossing, and you stay away from calories the rest of your night. Anything that goes in your past your mouth is just water. And you learn how to recreate, enjoy your life without food for the 4 or 5 hours before bedtime. So eating dessert before you get full, not after you get full, helps prevent overeating. It marks the end of eating. It increases satisfaction with a lighter dinner. And of course, now we can get assistance and camaraderie and involve social and enjoyable activities that don't involve food, right? We have to learn to do that. And larger portions of low-calorie food help, right? So we eat robust portions of cooked eggplant, and salad and raw vegetables, mushrooms, cauliflower, make a cauliflower mashed potato. We put 8 cups of cauliflower with 1 boiled Yukon Gold potato with some chopped spinach and fried onion. We're frying the onion in a dry pan. We're heating the pan up hot, chopping up the onion, frying it in the pan with no oil till it glistens, and then mixing it with the cooked cauliflower and a little bit of potato in there, and we make a delicious tasting, and maybe a little bit of garlic nutter, a little bit of roasted garlic with a little bit of cashews in there to give you some increased flavor. We're making delicious meals and delicious flavors that people can eat. Robust portions of food like zucchini and spaghetti squash and asparagus and citrus fruit and melons and berry. We're eating substantial amounts of food that's lower in calories, that supplies us with nutrients. And of course, people can do this on their own. They have to work to learning it. But if you need help and you have to go somewhere and you want to come into my facility, obviously I have a retreat in San Diego. That's a beautiful place that people come to spend a month or 2 or 3 to cement these benefits, utilize the tools, and to leave with the tools they need to do this for the rest of their life. And I get tremendous enjoyment. My wife and myself get tremendous enjoyment learning, getting to know people, working with them, assisting them, and also just developing friendships that we maintain for the rest of our lives, and people that have the tools they need to better their life and to keep on the right path after they leave here. So it's been tremendously rewarding to us, emotionally rewarding to us as well. All right, I am finishing up. I'm going to be able to take people's questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Fuhrman. That was a really great presentation. So we're going to begin the Q&A portion. For the audience, if you'd like to ask Dr. Fuhrman a question, you can do so by raising your hand in Zoom. The instructions will be placed in the chat. Many of our speakers have started talking about health beyond what traditionally were the things that we focused on in terms of diet and exercise. And they're talking about things like community, relationships, and the such. What, in your experience, I mean, obviously your talk was heavy on this today. What is driving that all of a sudden we're realizing the impact of these things outside of diet and exercise on our health?
Well, I think that's an important thing to mention, is because, some of us, myself, for example, used to be paid from Whole Foods Market and other corporations to reduce their healthcare costs by educating their employees into healthy eating. And we'd see only a small percent of the people that are exposed to this information that would actually apply it in their lives. And so there's a large number of people who have learned about healthy eating that don't do it, or have recidivism and deal with food in an addictive manner. So I think that in looking at our own personal inadequacies, our own personal failure in able to reach people, to motivate them to make the changes we want them to make, has enabled us to try to go into to able to study the underlying emotional reasons why people don't live healthfully and choose not to live healthfully. So I think it's critically important for us professionals who are invested in trying to get people to live a healthy life and reverse their diabetes and reverse their heart disease and reverse their obesity and reverse their autoimmune disease. They have to be able to comply with the recommendations. A lot of us are giving recommendations that we could be somewhat a little bit minor points of deviance from each other, but it's all worthless if nobody's following it anyway. We're talking about that people are living on fast food and junk food and keep overeating all the kinds of garbage, and they won't stop no matter what you tell them to do. And they can't stop, even though they've learned this information, and they feel guilty about not being able to stop. So I think that the need to go into more than just the science of nutrition and food, to be able to enable people to understand what are the social implications and the emotional implications of their behavior. And as we know, being happy in life and living a long life is not all food. So us lifestyle medicine specialists have to expand our knowledge base to learn about exercise, right? And emotional poise and pollution. And so we have to expand our life, because just food alone is not going to do it. You have to have while you're under chronic stress your whole life, you know what I mean? So we have to say, well, what are the factors that lead to chronic stress? And how does that chronic stress create people's inability to live healthfully? So it's all interrelated, I think. So we got to teach and learn this in a integrated form.
So what I'm hearing is that in the past, people will be speaking about all this great information about how to be healthy, and yet people were learning this information and not acting on it. And instead of saying, it's your fault for not listening to us, people are now stepping back and saying, how should we be communicating and crafting our message in order to get people to be able to actually act on this information?
That's exactly true.
All right, great. And so you talked about communication, and you see this all the time with people communicating with other people, and it's not really what they're talking about that they're arguing about, it's the way that they're communicating. And you gave an example of someone that was I forget the exact example, but you gave an example of poor communication. Can you give us an example of how someone should respond when someone comes at you negatively? Like, you're talking about health, for example, and they come at you and they attack you. What would be a good way to respond in a way that's not ego-driven, that neutralizes that the propensity for escalation that distracts us from being an effective communicator?
It's relating to something that relates to them. Is that like something that's funny? I used to think the same way too. I used to think that way too, and luckily I changed the way but of course I learned something that helped me personally. It may not help you, but you know what? Now there's something I can relate to you. I like that you're such a nice, I like that you did this thing. You think of something good you like about them. I love that I thought that I love that you were so considerate. I love that you have this. I so much that you're such a bright, something that you appreciate about that person. And, if I could have some ability to have a positive effect on you, this is what I think you should maybe consider or look into this. So in other words, it's not taking it personal. It's trying to relate to that person, in some way show them you care about them, and then explain why you live this way, but not with the intent to convert them to what you live. Because you don't want to push them to try to push them back. We're not trying to change their behavior. We're trying to have them respect why you made the change for yourself. It'll come to a time where they may say themselves they want to make that change. But we're trying to build a relationship with them, build their feeling that we care for them, and earn their understanding for what we do, why we're doing something possibly. All while we're thinking, is this goodwill for this person? And then when we built this relationship, see, if you're taking somebody, even somebody you love, if you're trying to force them or batter them into change, they're going to push back in the other direction. But if you show them, if you show them that you have consistent, and you can say, consistent care for them, consistent love for them, that's not based on their own behavior, that's like unquestionable. And then they'll be more likely to consider what you have to say. And you don't have to have the intent to make them change right now. You just have to have the intent to make them consider what you're saying and them understand that you're speaking from your heart in their best interest, right? So yes, in a lot of ways we can use our creativity to have goodwill for them, and that could be being humorous or being shown that we relate to them and feel for what they're going through. But we don't have to be protecting of our own egos or feel threatened by what people say to us.
Great, thank you. And I love what you had to say about dopamine sensitivity, and specifically dopamine insensitivity. So then you were talking about how food and this hyperpalatable food was making us less sensitive to dopamine, and then driving us to seek foods that fed our drive for dopamine. Does the way that we eat and the fact that it fosters a dopamine insensitivity, does that, based on your experience, also drive the behavior for people to sit there and scroll on their phones? Like, does the food we eat and its impact on dopamine drive other behaviors outside of food-related behaviors to seek for dopamine?
I'm not so sure about that. But we use the term dopamine and dopamine sensitivity, but certainly it's an oversimplification of the neurologic messengers and how the brain actually works. It's helpful for people to understand it, but it's more complicated than just one neurotransmitter involved. It's, there's cell communications, and we're saying here is an interaction between the digestive tract, the byproducts produced by bacteria in the digestive tract, the blood-brain barrier, the neuropeptides, the dopamine, it's all, leptin, GLP-1, but even those are oversimplification because there might be 100 different hormones and messengers involved here. So yeah, to a degree it makes sense that, but we know that feeding children sugar and using parties and holidays and rewarding them with donuts, it does lead to them moving to other addictive substances and addictive behaviors. That's true. So we do look for other ways we get addicted to being overly stimulated. But that predominantly comes with overly stimulated with food, and of course moves on into high school to drugs and to alcohol, and then could move on to more serious drug abuse in later life. But fast food and processed food and sweets and fried foods are highly addictive substances and are very difficult for people to want to give up.
Thank you. So many years ago, I was talking to somebody about not feeling great, and they said, well, look what you're eating. And it was like, an aha moment for me to correlate how I was feeling with what I was eating. Why don't people tend to associate their health and specifically how they feel at any given moment based on what they just put into their body?
Because it's called cognitive dissonance. When my daughter was 4 years old, she said, "Why are these parents poisoning their children?" I said, "Don't these parents love their children? Why are they feeding the children junk food?" I said, "Well, they don't know it's bad for them. It's like if everybody smoked cigarettes and all the kids were smoking on the playground, you wouldn't think it's bad because everybody's doing it." But so it's one hand, it's the addict or the person abusing their body blocks from their conscious cerebral thought the idea that they're harming themselves. So it's blocked away, and the addictive brain accomplishes that. The accomplishment of the primitive brain is to lose the cerebral function of the cerebral brain, and so it doesn't have power over your behaviors. So the primitive brain can gain power over your behavior, and that's the nature of addiction. So addiction now takes over your conscious thinking, and the brain now, your cerebral brain, tries to rationalize why it's okay to continue being addicted or continuing to consume self-destructive substances. So now the person's lost their ability, they've lost the keys to the bank. Their own thinking and behavior is no longer intent on their own self-interest. There's too many other motives mixed in there that are biologically focused on chemicals in the brain or affecting your thinking. And now I'm saying this person is more prone to being subjugated to bizarre conspiracy theories and can be politically indoctrinated to be more violent or angered or be more callous and selfish and be more of other people and more into their own narcissistic. So the diet fuels into this negativity bias of the brain and the narcissistic tendency of humans who now the primitive brain is more powerful than the cerebral brain, and we gotta switch the power there to get rid of addiction, and also it benefits the person's ability to be happy and to be content and to live a longer life. And we could see it happening, and I discussed that the word pellagra is a disease from niacin deficiency that leads to confusion, aggression, and even homicidal and suicidal behavior. And there was a huge explosion in violence and crimes in the mid 1800s and late 1800s from pellagra in the South, and it causes people to get they call it a causal necklace, a red neck, due to from people eating too much corn, molasses, and pork, and not having enough vegetables and beans in their diet. And it wasn't until the early 1900s when a doctor first discovered that pellagra was due to niacin deficiency that could be cured by eating vegetables, and they were able to release these angered, violent people from prison and reduce their recidivism as they ate healthier. And we're seeing this today. There's so many people today who have these nutritionally deficient brains that are more angered and violent and bizarre thinking and led in the wrong direction and more narcissistic and selfish behaviors. So we see that. So the human brain is very complicated, and our behavior is affected by what we eat, right? By the healthy diet leads to a healthier brain that can be more logical and more peaceful and less irritable and less easily angered and more compassionate.
Thank you. So if I'm hearing you correctly, some of the cultural issues and the social issues that we're dealing with today can be attributed to our health status, particularly the types of foods that we eat and the way that we take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And we see that in that areas where they eat the worst have the most brain injury, lower economic achievement, lower job performance, lower happiness quotient, more depression, more crime. We see that the measurements of brain health and societal health is impeded by exposure to unhealthy food and lack of food in the environment people are raised, lack of healthy food in their environment they're raised in.
So you had touched on the microbiome during your presentation. How has our understanding of the microbiome over the last decade or so changed the way that we understand health in general?
It's interesting to be able to see how the body works in conjunction with each other. But, the recommendations were the same. It's just that we have more reasons for the recommendations. You know what I mean? So it's still, in other words, taking probiotics might be helpful, and taking broccoli sprout extract and resistant starch powders and, and modified citrus pectin, these things might be helpful, but nothing's as helpful as eating a healthy diet and getting the nutrients we need from a broad assortment of natural foods. And that even probiotics aren't as useful and beneficial as getting our microbiome optimized by eating the right assortment of different types of fiber. So ultimately, the research has moved in the direction over the last decades to show that the best microbiome is built from eating the healthiest diet possible. So it just reinforces what we've been saying over the last 3 decades.
Okay, so it's more of understanding of what's going on and why what we're already doing or what you're already suggesting works, but it doesn't really add so much, something overly new to how we should be handling our health.
That's said well. That's correct. I mean, it does mean that there's some obviously people who, and some doctors and obesity people that feel like anything they give to people is a help, and then people want to have something that they feel is helpful, something prescribed, so they can give them probiotics or something that may help, or they give them a shot or some other pills. But in any case, it's still the basics that do the work and are more effective. And certainly giving people some extra probiotics is better than giving them a shot that may cause cancer 10 years from now. You know what I mean? It's certainly these things are could be. So there's so giving some things and focusing on the microbiome is a safer thing to focus on than to focus on medicinal and chemotherapeutic drugs, which have more potentially dangerous side effects also.
Thank you. And the term hangry has become very popular over in the last few years. Is someone being hangry a sign that they have a toxic diet?
Yes, of course. I think I'm one of the unique individuals who've been discussing this for the last 30, 40 years. And I think I've, and some of my scientific publications and work on this issue and publications on this issue have permeated scientific studies and other thinkers around the world. So I think I'm proud of the fact that I've contributed to the science on human hunger, in that detoxification, people don't recognize when they stop eating unhealthfully, they get these sensations that are misinterpreted as hunger. So, and it drives them to overeat. And we get so habituated to overeating and to feeling bad if we don't overeat that we think we're hungry. I mean, how could the body be 50 pounds overweight and be fatigued but not getting enough calories? We can just burn the calories that are stored in the body. People don't understand the fatigue is not due to lack of calories. The fatigue is due to the circulation of metabolic waste in the bloodstream when you're not eating, which is more effectively accomplished in the non-feeding state. So it's very important for lifestyle medicine physicians, obesity specialists, and just individuals looking to lose weight to recognize that feeling fatigue is not an indication to eat food to get more energy. Because people want, I got to eat before I go to the gym. I got to eat before I go here. I got to keep my energy up. I got to eat to keep my energy up. They have to understand that we're not eating to keep our energy up. That's fatigue due to lack. When you're not eating is withdrawal from a noxious diet, because if you're fatigued, you need rest. You don't need food. If you're hungry, you need food. And so the fatigue, and the people are just overly fatigued from eating unhealthily. So we have sustained good energy. We can work all day. We can hike and do things. And I can go for a hike and I can go to the gym in the afternoon. We don't get fatigued. I don't need food to reduce the fatigue. I can skip a meal and still not be fatigued. So fatigue, but I get hungry if I don't eat. I don't get fatigued. I get fatigued if I overexercise or I don't sleep. But we got to disengage this concept of fatigue with eating. It's one of the people, I see why people fail on diets, because they think they got to eat more food to keep their energy up because they feel fatigued if they don't overeat.
And is toxic hunger something, given how, people who are overweight have so much toxins in their body, is toxic hunger something that we need to deal with for a while as we lose weight and the toxins are released, and we just need to deal with it and wait until we're actually hungry and start feeling it in our throat?
That's difficult, because my findings are that that you have to build health to get the sensation of feeling real hunger again. And it could take people eating healthfully for like 6 months before they start to feel. That study I showed with 750 people, where 90% felt hunger experienced here, most of them didn't feel hunger experienced here till they did the diet for 6 months and lost a lot of weight and got there and changed the biochemistry of their body. And so even we interviewed that in the same study, we interviewed those individuals and said, when did your taste muscle improve so that you started enjoying this new way of eating as much as the flavor and taste of your old diet? And most of the people said it took them 6 months for that as well. See, I used to think it would happen quicker, but it takes a long time. So people have to go on with this concept that they're not going to really feel true hunger until for a long time from now. They got to deal with understanding how much they eat and look at the volume of food on their plate, look at the scale, follow the recommendations, adjust their caloric need so they're moving in the direction of their ideal weight, and eventually real hunger will come back. And I say to people, people say, "Oh, on this great diet, I'm never hungry." And I'm saying, well, if you're never hungry, you're chronically overeating, because it's good to be hungry episodically. Because I want to be hungry to show I didn't overeat the day before. If I wake up hungry, or if I eat a light enough breakfast or lunch and I'm hungry before dinner, great, I'm hungry before dinner. It showed I didn't overeat at breakfast and lunch. So hunger becomes an important tool to help us regulate our calories to make sure we're not eating more calories than we need. So it's good to feel hungry before we eat. And then when you get real hunger, which is felt here, it enhances taste sensation. So the symptoms of hunger are three of them. Real hunger are this sensation, a light sensation in your upper chest, lower throat, with enhanced salivation and enhanced taste sensation. So if people they bring this bowl of soup to my office and say, "Hey, Joel, I made this healthy soup. You got to try it. It's great." I'll say, "Well, thanks a lot. Let me put it in the refrigerator. And when I get hungry, I'll eat it because I'll enjoy it more. I'm not going to enjoy it now because I ate a couple of hours ago and I'm not really hungry yet. So I ate a light breakfast today, and I prefer not to eat right now. I want to wait till lunch till I get hungry, because then the food will taste better and I'll enjoy the meal more."
Great, thank you. And I'm going to throw it out to the audience for a couple of questions. Rita B, please state where you're from and ask your question.
My name is Rita Batija from Long Island, New York. Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman. My question is, will you give 2 tablespoons of flaxseed meal to male every day whose estrogen levels are high, even though flax seeds have estrogenic effect?
Yes, of course. That flax seeds have anti-estrogenic effects. They have estrogen-like compounds that block the estrogen receptor from being stimulated, lowering risk of breast and prostate cancer. So I, for example, will mix together ground chia seeds, ground flax seeds, and hemp seeds, and I have it all mixed in a jar in my refrigerator. And if I'm having my morning oatmeal and my morning fruit, I'll put a couple of tablespoons of that on top. Yes. And for some of my people looking to lose weight, they might put 1 heaping tablespoon of that on top. But there's no negative estrogenic effects from eating flax seeds, nor is there from eating soybeans either, because they block the E1 receptors on breast and prostate tissue, but they stimulate the E2 estrogen receptors on bone tissue for maintaining bone and muscle strength. So the same thing with flaxseed and chia seeds. They're blocking estrogen stimulation where it should be blocked, and they're stimulating it on muscle tissue and bone tissue where you want it to be somewhat stimulated. So it's all good.
Right. Thank you for that. And we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to throw it out to Joe W. Please state where you're from and ask your question, Joe.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your encouragement, doctor, to change to plant diet. I think a big hurdle to overcome is what our mothers cooked and our fathers ate. A lot of animals, and that can go back generations. 2 questions. Since you say whole foods are best, why cook, since cooking destroys vitamins and fiber and can make less than whole? And what about colon cleansing, since waste from eating, especially white flour and processed foods, can dry out and get stuck in the colon for a long time? Many books say this is another cause of disease.
Okay. First of all, we cook foods because we expand we eat beans cooked, and beans are not safe if you don't eat them cooked. And by removing them from the diet, you're losing a great category of food that leads to human longevity and adds protein and valuable anti-cancer nutrients like inositol pentakis phosphate, which doesn't allow tumors to grow. So by removing beans from the diet and not cooking them, you can sprout smaller beans like mung beans and lentils, but still, and cooking green vegetables has been shown in scientific studies to increase the green vegetable consumption that people consume, which is linked to longer lifespan. Higher intake of green vegetables are linked to longer lifespan, and you can increase the vegetable consumption by cooking some vegetables. So a Nutritarian diet is a vegetable-based diet, not a grain-based diet. And cooking the vegetables and beans enhances the vegetables and beans that you feel comfortably eating. So when your diet is all raw, people generally eat too much fruit, which lowers and as we get older, our protein bioavailability and digestibility goes down. And by having the diet be higher in fruit and raw vegetables, it's difficult for the person to eat enough protein by not having some cooked beans and cooked vegetables in there. So it definitely is lifespan enhancing, and it maybe and more immune system stabilizing to eat some cooked vegetables and cooked beans in that case. And as far as colon cleansing is concerned, no, colon cleansing involves, number one, using laxatives like senna and cascara that cause irritation to the walls of the colon, which make people become less sensitized to normal peristalsis, which develop more chronic bowel dysfunction. So colon cleansing leads to bowel dysfunction and poor health. And there's no stuff stuck on the wall of people's colons. That's also an alternative medicine myth. I'm a family physician who've done hundreds, if not maybe even thousands of flexible sigmoidoscopies on my patients, looking in their colons. And gastroenterologists spend all day doing colonoscopies and don't see things stuck to the wall of people's colons. They look at the wall of the colon. So in other words, if you're taking in bentonite clay and other toxic stuff that the alternative doctor gives you, it can stick to the wall of the colon. They can pull out, but that would be extremely. It's not common, and you don't have years of food particles stuck in the crevices and walls of your colon. That's another myth. So those things are not necessary. You just need to eat a healthy diet, and your colon will be clean. And my experience in being a doctor who's done colonoscopies and flexible sigmoidoscopies on my patients, I've seen people's diverticulosis clear up and go away and resolve after years of eating this high fiber nutritarian diet that includes nuts and seeds, beans and strawberry seeds. In other words, they're used to say, the seeds of strawberries and berries and nuts could stick in the diverticulum and cause that's a myth too. You don't increase your risk of diverticulum turning into diverticulosis, turning into diverticulitis by eating these foods at all. So I actually see the high fiber diet makes the colon heal itself. So basically, back to the basics. The basics work, and the body doesn't need any of these extraordinary means to be healthy.
Great. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Fuhrman, for all the information that you shared today. I really enjoyed the perspective on this presentation. So if we could unmute the audience, please.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.